In countries like Germany, the Netherlands and the United Kingdom, there is this class of people with university degrees who are currently below 35 years old. Within this class there is this consensus that things like multiculturalism and a centralized European Union are positive and beneficial. This class views itself as intelligent and quote-unquote progressive, and it is often very hard to convince them that the way that they view the world is flawed. To people who want to keep their own homeland unchanged by mass migration and basically have a more conservative mentality, it can be quite frustrating to talk to these university degree holders from Western European countries. Perhaps it is not an uncommon scene to you. You are having some after work drinks with some colleagues, the conversation goes in the direction of, for example, Brexit, and you find out that your colleagues are all strongly against Brexit and that they take the side of those who would like to ignore the referendum and keep the UK in the EU. Later in the conversation they all agree that Matteo Salvini and Viktor Orban are very dangerous and harmful people. Then you've had enough and mention that you think that democracy also implies that you respect the outcome of an election when the left doesn't win. Your colleagues then start mocking you. When you later say to them that they should try to watch less mainstream media because it is all just one perspective, one of your colleagues then accuses you of wearing a tinfoil hat and believing in conspiracy theories. When another one of your colleagues then suggests that perhaps you've become the victim of Russian propaganda, you're flabbergasted and don't know anymore what to say. It is important to realize that these people do not have bad intentions, even though they're often quite close-minded and have the tendency to quickly label anyone who has a different worldview. The reality is that it is not their own fault. They're simply the product of a zeitgeist and of a very flawed education system. In this video I am going to describe the worldview of these people as best as I can, in order to give you an idea of where they're coming from, how their worldview is constructed, and even more importantly, which concepts are lacking from their worldview. With the information presented in this video, I hope you might be better equipped to shake their worldview, and knowing more about their worldview and how it is constructed than they themselves know is quite fun and useful. The worldview of the Western European educated class below 35 years old is constructed according to these 6 points. And yes, of course there can also be more than 6 points, I could make 10 or 20, but these 6 points I think are the most fundamental, and each of them will be discussed in this video. 1. The free Western nation is evil. During the first half of the 20th century, Europe was a disaster, and after this period was finally over, the peoples of Western Europe decided that something like this should never happen again, and for good reasons. During the second half of the 20th century, it was therefore concluded that it was all the fault of the free and independent Western nation, and therefore the concept of the free nation state gradually got delegitimized and washed away from history. And you might think, so what? But even though this might seem like a small change at first, throughout this video you will see that it is actually the most fundamental problem within the worldview of the Western European university degree holder. Because most of the other problems with the worldview are actually the result of the removal of the Western free and independent nation, like a house of cards that collapses if you remove the card at the bottom. The concept of a nation, a culturally homogeneous group that often has a common language, religion and history, which governs itself independently by granting every member of the nation one vote, has been gradually rejected after the Second World War. This means that everything that has to do with the nation state and national independence was gradually removed from the textbooks, such as how ancient Greece, consisting of independent city-states which competed with one another, was the greatest civilization of the ancient world, how the free Italian city-states were at the basis of the progress during their time period, causing the Renaissance, which went upwards into the increasingly strict Holy Roman Catholic Empire, which drove the peoples of Central Europe to want national independence for themselves. The 30 Years' War nowadays is described in textbooks as merely a religious conflict. In reality it was also a fight for independence, and the importance of the resulting treaties of Westphalia, which represented an important step in the direction of an order of free and independent nation states has been forgotten, and the achievements of the Dutch, which was entirely the result of their national independence, nowadays are endlessly downplayed. So these university degree holders from Western Europe basically have an incomplete understanding of Western history. In the place in their heads where there actually should be knowledge about the importance of the concept of the free nation state, they have a big empty hole. No Montesquieu, no Westphalian treaties, no social cohesion, no nation. They are basically uneducated if it comes to this very important topic and everything that has to do with it. This has caused the free Western nation to no longer be viewed as something that decent and intelligent people talk about. It is considered something dirty, backwatered, and something that represents the darkest days of European history. And therefore the Western European educated class unconsciously believes that moving as far away as possible from an order of independent nations by moving in the direction of an EU superstate is something that every decent and intelligent person should support. And it actually makes sense, because according to their worldview, it is the only logical conclusion of history. Because if the free nation state is basically it is very wise and logical to want to move away from the free nation state as far as possible. But it isn't just a negative view of the nation state and of national independence that defines the worldview of the educated class from Western Europe. Because what happens if you remove the free nation from history by removing it from the minds of the people? What actually happens when you do that? What other related concepts will be the collateral damage? If you remove the nation state, you automatically also remove an awareness of social cohesion, social trust, the benefits of cultural homogeneity, etc. But you also start to believe that most people in the entire world don't see any problem with sentences like Japan is the home of the Japanese, Chile is the home of the Chileans, Mongolia is the home of the Mongolians, and Germany is the home of the Germans. And there actually isn't any problem with these sentences. The free nation requires a certain amount of space to exist. Every nation state is therefore located on a geographical location. So Mongolia is here and not here. When the Mongolian people vote and the result is some new law, then this law applies in Mongolia, but not in Indonesia. But the free nation has been removed as a legitimate and important concept from the minds of the Western European educated class. And therefore the idea of having a culturally homogeneous group which views a certain piece of land as their land and inhabiting this piece of land while developing themselves and their culture on this piece of land also isn't a legitimate idea anymore. In other words, the world belongs to everyone. So if you present this sentence to the average German university degree holder, Germany is the home of the Germans, you are likely to get a very strange reaction, because he thinks that this very normal sentence is some kind of scary nationalistic rhetoric from a very dark and distant time period. They view it differently. Germany is part of planet Earth, and planet Earth belongs to all of humanity. And because there is one world and one humanity, therefore Germany belongs to everyone. It is a bit like if you look at this picture and you remove this dam, then the result will not only be that this wall here will be gone, but also that this part over here will be underwater. So as a result of removing the free nation as a cornerstone of Western civilization from the heads of these people, they also start believing that the world is everyone's. And what is the result of this? Well, mass migration, very normal. Islamic call to prayers in the streets of Western European cities, also very normal. The world is everyone's. This is not our country, everybody is a world citizen. So now that we've removed the concept of the free nations from history, and as a result of this also the concept of the free nation collectively owning a piece of land where they live, what can be another additional result of removing the free nation? Let's start by saying that the Western Europeans have a history of great worldwide expansion and trade. The French have been at the center of the French Empire, the British of the British Empire, and the Dutch also at some point have been been an important center of the world, and therefore to the Western Europeans the idea of having a leading role in the world is very normal, and their view of themselves has evolved accordingly. And as a result of this, the Western European educated class tends to feel as if they are leading the entire world. Western Europe is the center of the world, and they are the people in Western Europe who have the highest level of education. So therefore they are really very important and really leading the world. Also because they are quote-unquote progressive, the entire world is going to progress in the same way as they are. So therefore, just because they have rejected the free nation and believe that the world is everyone's, the entire world is moving in the direction of rejecting the free nation and believing that the world is everyone's. And therefore, 3. All of humanity is coming together. The Western European university degree holder, who is currently below 35 years old, has basically internalized this mentality. Mass migration into their own homelands and rapidly changing neighborhoods are interpreted simply as, the entire world is changing. They believe that the entire world is now moving into a post-national era, a time period when nations no longer exist and all that exists is one humanity. Let's move on to the next point. 4. Everyone is a liberal individual whose words can be taken at face value. The Western European educated individuals are often working at companies where there are also colleagues from other cultures who are likely to be decent and polite people. Therefore, the Western European university degree holders really don't see any problem with multiculturalism and diversity, because their only experience with other cultures is positive, which makes sense, because if you take some highly educated financial analysts from different countries and have them work in an international environment, it can actually be quite nice for them. They talk in English about the material, and during lunch they talk about their next holiday to Egypt, Malaysia or Dubai. And they talk about nice international cuisines. In addition, everyone is making enough money to live decent lives. And after work they all separate and every person goes back to his or her own house, so that they don't need to live with each other. And they also do not need to argue with one another about how to run society or what laws there should be. So it is very easy for the Western European individuals in this situation to project their own cultural expectations onto the people from different cultures. They think that everyone is just like themselves, an individual who is liberal and whose words can be taken at face value. So when after another terror attack their Muslim colleague comes to them and says that there is not a single sentence in the Quran that recommends any violence, they will just take it at face value and believe whatever he says. And when their Muslim colleague mentions in a conversation that Yusuf al-Qaradawi is a very important scholar in Islam, they will not check out online who Yusuf al-Qaradawi is. They will just assume that all is good and that there is no problem, because Ahmed is a really nice guy. There is a problem with this mentality though. Things like individualism, liberalism and being forbidden to lie came into existence within very specific historical circumstances. Individualism came in via the Renaissance. There are also European nations that missed the Renaissance and therefore missed individualism, and who as a result are quite different from the others. And liberalism was developed within the context of Western European nation states, where there was a relatively high degree of social cohesion and social trust, and only within such a context of national social cohesion does allowing each other great freedom as individuals make sense, because you can still trust your neighbor even though he has a very strange hobby that you don't understand. Being forbidden to lie came in via Christianity. Thou shalt not lie. Try going to countries where the people do not have the Christian foundation, like India or China. Peoples like the British, the French and the Dutch of today have internalized these concepts, which were developed within very specific historical contexts, and are now unconsciously projecting these concepts onto people from totally different cultures. They blindly assume that the Muslim colleague who claims that Islam means al-Salam, which means peace, is speaking the truth. They assume that people from totally different cultures have internalized individualism, liberalism and speaking the truth in a normal conversation just like they themselves have. And if they haven't internalized these concepts yet, they at some point will, because the world is moving in this direction anyway. This, however, is an illusion. So now we have removed the free nation and their land from history, as well as introduced the idea that the entire world is moving into a post-national age, while everyone will magically turn into a liberal individual, whose words can be taken at face value. Let's go back for a while to the most important point we've discussed, the rejection of the free nation, because there is something else that is the collateral damage of removing this very important concept. The rejection of the free nation also implies the rejection of the will of the nation. The will of the people, which basically means the rejection of the democratic vote. And this leads to the embracing of something entirely else, expertise. 5. The experts will know what to do. It is the belief that those who are experts at something should not be there to serve the people, but instead to dictate to the people what must be done. The people are believed to be stupid, uneducated, and if we, the educated class, let the people decide, the result will be Brexit, Trump, Viktor Orban, Matteo Salvini. And therefore it is the best to have the West run not by the people, but by the quote-unquote experts. So for example, when some group of experts in the Netherlands decides that the farmers need to cut their number of livestock in half, and the farmers strongly disagree because for them this would mean bankruptcy, then the experts have it right because they're experts, and the Dutch farmers are just some stupid people who don't know how the world works. Because the will of those people who are less highly educated is stupid, and the experts are very smart and know what is best. So Brexit, stupid. Trump, stupid voters. Salvini, stupid voters shouldn't be allowed to vote. Forum for Democracy, as the largest party in the Netherlands, bah, stupid democracy. If only the highly educated people, the experts, could decide what would happen, then all of these dangerous populist victories would no longer be a problem. So therefore, let's centralize power to the experts at the EU, at the UN, at the international courtrooms, at international human rights organizations, and so on. But there is something else going on here as well. The Western European university degree holders believes in expertise over the will of the people, and because he himself has a university degree and is from Western Europe, you know, the center of the entire world, it leads him to believe more in his own expertise than in the will of the people elsewhere. And this is the case even though he himself is actually much less informed about the world than he thinks he is. So the wildfires in Brazil are all the fault of Bolsonaro, and in Poland everybody is xenophobe, bigot and racist. And why? Because it was in the news. So therefore it must be true. So therefore when talking to the people who belong to this educated class, you should not be surprised when, for example, while talking about a country like Italy, they say something along the lines of, oh, they should just do this or that. Or when they, for example, say, oh, the Hungarians must follow the directives of the European Commission because they're in the EU. The Western European educated individual tends to talk about a completely different nation, as if he is speaking about some department of the company he's working. Let's move on to the last point of this video. When talking about nations, social cohesion within groups, social trust within nations, and so on, it is important to realize that we're not talking about something that is man-made. It is not like some evil white male suddenly came to the world and said, hey, I have a great idea. Let's divide humanity and create different nations. Wahaha. Nation states are the best way to organize humanity because this system matches the best with human nature. Humans exist in groups, and things like social trust and social cohesion are important because these principles describe very well when human beings feel more comfortable with one another and cooperate better with one another. It is the same reason why within families there is a higher degree of social trust and cooperation than between families. The Western European university degree holder talks about multiculturalism and diversity in ways that do not match well with human nature. However, he himself is still a human being, so human nature also exists within him. And human nature expresses itself in the form of intuition, in the form of gut instinct. The individuals who belong to the Western European educated class have a very strange attitude towards this thing called the gut instinct. They may have very complex and strange ideas in their heads, but they still will feel that something is not right when they accidentally walk into the wrong neighborhood. They still feel the sense of danger when they get confronted with the harsh reality of multiculturalism in Western Europe, and they will feel this in their lower belly, in their gut. In German, gut feeling translates as Bauchgefühl, belly feeling. In Dutch, it is Onderbuikgevoel, lower belly feeling, so the feeling that can be felt in the lower belly. The educated Western European individuals might have a great time at work with their multicultural colleagues, but when the working day is finished, they prefer to go back to their own homes in their own nice neighborhoods, where they will be surrounded by people with whom they share the same culture and therefore feel at home. When the workday is finished, they will not join their Muslim colleague to go to the Muslim neighborhood, where they will be confronted with the Islamic call to prayer and dozens of hijab wearing women chattering with one another in a foreign language. So even though the educated class supports multiculturalism in their heads, they don't support it in their lower bellies. Whenever they are confronted with Islamization, they will feel uncomfortable, but after that they need to rationalize to themselves their feeling of discomfort. So they rationalize that gut instinct cannot be trusted, that gut instinct is xenophobic and wrong. Do not trust the intuition in your lower body. And because they're very smart, they're very good at coming up with complex reasons of why their own gut instinct is wrong. Smart people who spend a lot of time in their heads are much better at this than working class people who do not live as much in their head and therefore are more connected to their intuition. If it comes down to it, however, the behavior of the educated class is the same as the behavior of the working class. Both do not want to live in the multicultural neighborhoods. The working class would like to move away from it, but they often can't, and the educated class already has moved away from it. Perhaps some of the younger members of the educated class are still living in very mixed city districts, but when thinking about getting children with their partner, they will move to some nice town or neighborhood where they will be surrounded with people with whom they share culture, history and civilizational values. So this is literally where there exists a gap between their flawed worldview and their own actual behavior. They like diversity in their heads, but are happy to live in some nice culturally homogeneous neighborhood. They believe that border walls are undesirable, but they still live in a house with walls and with a front door that is locked during the night. They believe that all of humanity is coming together, but they themselves still prefer to move away from all of it. The free and independent nation state is such a good idea because it matches well with human nature. The Western European educated class has been educated to have a worldview which rejects the free nation and embraces the idea that the world is everyone's. But because they are human beings and therefore embody human nature, they still have intuition, gut instinct, and gut instinct has a secret. Gut instinct is nationalistic, and this is where the body and the mind of the Western European university degree holder get separated, even though he still makes life choices based on his body and not based on his mind. So to summarize this video, the worldview of the Western European university degree holder can be described as follows. The free Western nation is evil, which is the result of a lacking of the importance of national freedom. The world is everyone's, which is the result of the lacking of the importance of national freedom and the importance of a free nation collectively owning a piece of land. All of humanity is coming together, which is the result of the lacking of the same two things above, plus as additional cause, the sense that Western Europe is the center of the world. They also assume that everyone is a liberal individual whose words can be taken at face value, of which the cause is the projection of the own internalized values onto people from different cultures. They also believe that the quote-unquote experts know what is right, which again is the result of the lacking of the importance of national freedom and of the importance of the democratic process in itself. They finally have the attitude that gut instinct cannot be trusted, which is basically their way to cope up with the fact that their own intuition craves cultural homogeneity. And these 6 points can also be described in the following manner. During the second half of the 20th century, the free Western nation which inhabits a certain piece of land, which they view as theirs, got washed away from history as a way of dealing with the first half of the 20th century. And this led to the idea that the world is everyone's, to the idea that all of humanity is coming together, and to the idea that the experts know what is right. The new reality of multiculturalism is then interpreted through the idea that everyone is a liberal individual whose words can be taken at face value. However, gut instinct signals that there is a problem, and the way to cope with this is through the rejection of gut instinct, even though their life's choices and behavior is still driven by their gut instinct. So here you have the worldview of the educated class from Western Europe. Of course, people are not all the same, and of course there are also people who do not view the world in this way. However, I think it is safe to say that by far most people who are Western European, below 35 years old, and have a university degree will have internalized this worldview to a quite strong degree. And based on this information, it will probably be easier for you to shake the worldview of these individuals. This can be best done by calmly asking them questions which have something to do with these 6 points. Thanks for watching this rather long video. If you like this topic, please subscribe to my channel and feel free to check out my book. Have a nice day.